Hello everybody, Christina here, and in this video I'm going to be showing you guys how I use Illustrator to edit my section drawings that I exported from Revit. Sometimes 3D modeling software like that can be hard to learn. I remember when I was starting off with Illustrator and 3D modeling, it was so overwhelming. It felt like everything was so complicated. So this video is for you if you're a beginner and you don't really know how to use Illustrator. Let's get right into it. Okay, starting off in Illustrator, I've opened my section drawings. I exported it from Revit as a PDF, but there are a few issues here. The first issue is that it exported with an automatic template and it's not formatted correctly. But rather than trying to fix it up in Revit, I'm gonna go ahead and edit it using Illustrator. It's a little easier and it's also a good way to get familiar with Illustrator. Now, I do want to point out that my Illustrator interface might look different from yours. This depends on the workspace that you're using. And if we go to the top right corner, we can see where it says switch workspace and you can choose any layout that you'd want. I'm in Essentials Classic, but I do have a few different windows and tabs pulled up. This is just how I've come to work in Illustrator, and it all depends on what you prefer. First things first, I want to point out that everything is on one layer right now, and layers are very important in Illustrator. Keeping that in mind that everything's on one layer, I'm going to name this layer main. That way I know this is the main drawing, the main lines and everything. Now I'm going to look at my artboard. Now the artboard is a document that it will print out at or export out as, and we can see that my drawings are off that artboard, and I can already tell that this artboard is probably pretty big. I know that if I go here to properties, I can see the units I have are in inches. I have one artboard and I can edit the artboard by clicking that, and I can see that it is a pretty big artboard. It's 42 inches by 30 inches, and I do not want it to be that big. I want to change it to a regular poster size. So I'm going to change that. I can go here and just change the input. And so now I have it properly sized, but I do want to point out that this little symbol here maintains the width and height proportions depending if you have it selected and not selected. Now I just have to move my main drawings onto the artboard. But first, I'm just going to clean up all this other stuff that I do not need. Now I'm just going to move the drawings to the actual board, and I'm going to zoom in just hitting Control+. And my drawings do not fit on this paper because they are too spaced out. So I'm going to move it around. Again, left clicking and holding and deleting what I don't need. Now I can get into editing the sections themselves. When I edit drawings like sections and elevations and whatnot using Illustrator, I keep in mind that it's mostly just editing lines and shapes, and knowing that makes it a whole lot easier. It's really not that complicated. But let's say I want to edit one of these lines and I click on it, and instead of selecting that little line like how I wanted to, it instead selected this box outline of my drawing. And that's because this is a clipping mask, and I know it's clipping mask because if I go to the left corner, it says clip group. So a lot of times drawings from Revit will have a clipping group or a clipping mask. And it can also be a little tedious if you don't recognize it, because let's say I wanted to delete this line and I think I have it selected and I hit delete, it will delete the whole drawing. So instead, when I click on this line and it selects that clipping mask, I can just right click and hit release clipping mask. That way these lines are not bound to that clipping mask. First, I'm just going to clean up my drawing by deleting the lines that I do not need. I'm just using my selection tool to delete those lines. I'm just selecting and hitting delete on my keyboard. So I'll clean up my drawings and we'll move on to the next step. Now that I've cleaned up my drawings, there's one little thing that I want to do before I move on, and that is edit some of the lines over here that are on my windows. We can see that Revit exported it as little lines that are supposed to be dashed, but I just want it to be continuous. I'm gonna go to my sidebar right here and select my pen tool. As we can see, it tells us it creates paths with using precision and anchor points and handles. So anchor points and handles and paths are really important when it comes to learning in Illustrator, especially when you're working with lines. Now, don't let that intimidate you. It is pretty simple once you start getting the hang of it. What I'm going to do is I'm just going to start right here on my first line, and I'm just going to connect it to where that line ends. We can see that it's a straight line right now, but I want it to curve like this one. So I'm going to go to my curvature tool, and I'm just going to go about the middle and pull it outwards like that. And I'm just going to continue doing that for the last two windows. So now I've done that, I'm going to move on to my next step, which would be filling in my section cuts. And for me, that would be my walls, my roof, my floor, and other objects like these rafters at the top. Usually in sections, the things that are cut are in a solid color, such as black. So to start off, I'm going to create a new layer. There's this plus symbol with a square. I'm gonna hit that, and now I created a new layer. It is called layer 2. So I'm just gonna name this layer section cut. That way I know which is which. It makes things easier to keep track of and overall more organized and easier to edit later on. So the first thing I'm going to do is just lock my main layer by just hitting this blank space that's between this eye and the color. What this does is it prevents you from being able to select anything from that layer. That'll prevent me from accidentally deleting something or editing something that I didn't want to. So I'm going to get started on my section cuts. I'm going to use the rectangle tool here on the left. If you don't see this rectangle tool, you can always hit this edit toolbar. If this tool here looks like a circle like this instead, you can always just click on it and hit the letter M on your keyboard and it'll turn to the rectangle. Likewise, if you want to use the circle tool, you can hit L and it turns back into that circle. I'm going to draw a rectangle of my wall right here. It's not solid like how I'd want it to be. We're looking at the properties of this rectangle I just made. You can see the width and the height, but we can also see the appearance properties. And right now it doesn't have any fill color, but it has a line color. So if I click out of it, I can see that that outline is right there. And I don't want it to have an outline color, so I'm gonna click on that box and I'm gonna hit this little box right here that has a red slash through it. That way there is no outline. I can hit this little square where fill is, and I'm brought to my swatches options, and I don't have any swatches here, but that's fine because Illustrator has some built in. You're just gonna hit this little swatch libraries menu, these little books at the bottom left, click it, and you can explore all these different swatches that they have. If I just want a regular black color, I can go to fill and hit this color palette right here, and we have our color option. I'm just gonna hit that black color. And I'm gonna do the same thing for the rest of the walls and floors. Editing my other section, I can tell that I need to edit my rectangle in order to match this slope. I can do that fairly easy, and it is also a good way to get familiar with anchor points. So now that I have my rectangle here, I'm going to use this cursor that is the filled in one that's white compared to the one that is just outlined. This tool will help you select anchor points. Anchor points are these little square dots that you see on these lines or shapes, and when you select it and you hold, you can stretch out your shape or object or line. And so I'm just going to do that and stretch it so it can snap to the points of the roof. It might look a little weird at first, but that is how I do it pretty quickly. And so now that I have my section cuts visible, I'm going to edit the line weights of my main layer. And starting with the roof, I'm going to select these 3 lines by, again, selecting one line and then holding down shift and then selecting the rest. That way I'm selecting all 3. I'm going to join them. That way they can all change the same line weight. And over here where it says stroke, we can edit the line weight to be more heavier than what it's already set at. Now that I have edited my line weights, I'm just gonna add a proper ground for my building to sit on. I'm just gonna make a new layer. I'm gonna rename that layer ground. I'm gonna lock this layer. I'm gonna go to my rectangle tool and I'm gonna draw out a rectangle that matches that. And I could use my swatches to have a solid color as my ground, but instead I want to use a pattern. The cool thing with Illustrator is that not only do they give you swatches in colors, but they also give you swatches for patterns. So I'm gonna go to that book option again. I am going to open up patterns. I'm gonna go to basic graphics and basic graphic textures. And there are all these options to choose from. But I prefer this one right here. And then I'm just gonna get rid of that outline of that rectangle. Now, I don't know about you guys, but I'm always being told that what's important in section drawings would be the scale and being able to see people. And currently I only have one person in one of my drawings and I wanna add more people. So I'm gonna look for those drawings of people using Adobe Stock. I'm going to just look up silhouette. And so I found the silhouettes that I want to use, and I've downloaded it as an AI instead of a image file. That way it's easier to edit in Illustrator. I've opened it up in Illustrator, and I'm just going to choose the silhouette that I would want to use. And on my keyboard, I'm just going to hit Control C to copy, and I'm going to go over here and again lock my layers, make a new layer, and call this one people. And then I'm going to paste it in. Of course, this silhouette is way too big and not to scale at all. I already know that this door right here reaches exactly 8 feet, so she should probably be around here. As I have my silhouette selected, I have the properties over here in the right corner. I can see the width and the height. And I'm gonna make sure that that constraint is locked. Unlike when I changed the size of my artboard, I wanna make sure that this silhouette maintains proportions. Otherwise, if I try to change the height when it's not locked, for example, it stretches out and gets distorted. So now I have this figure to scale, and I'm gonna keep on adding some people. Now that I've added people to my section drawing, I think I'm gonna add a little bit of color. First thing I'm gonna do, make a new layer. Again, I'm going to draw in that rectangle. I'm gonna go to my swatches and choose a color. This rectangle is completely blocking out my people, and I do not want it to do that. And the reason it's doing that is because it is in a layer that is above my people layer. So if I hold down and I drag it above, it will be able to go over any other layer. If I hold down and drag it all the way down, it will be beneath those layers. Now we can visibly see all the other layers. And now I'm gonna get started at my windows. I'm making that new layer called windows. I'm gonna use my rectangle tool. I'm gonna choose a different color, and I'm gonna draw out that rectangle. Now I need my rectangle to be able to match this curvature of this window. I'm gonna do this is by using my curvature tool, and I'm going to go over here to about the middle of my rectangle. I'm gonna click down and hold it up, and then I'm just gonna fill in the rest of my windows. Now I have my windows done, and I'm just going to continue coloring in some furniture as well on a separate layer. And now I think I'm at a good point with my sections, but I want to show y'all some cool things that you can do as well to liven up your sections. Right now it just looks like a giant blob, which is fine. Over here under properties, I'm going to go to where it says opacity or opacity. I'm going to click on it, and over here it gives me my blending mode, and this is something cool to experiment with and practice around with. There are so many options to choose from. For example, if I choose multiply, it will kind of blend in with the colors that are underneath it. If I choose soft light, it will kind of look more like shadows. Overall, there's a lot of blending options that you can choose from that are pretty cool. And if you don't want it to be as harsh as it is, we can turn down the opacity. This just brings down the level of transparency. So now my sections are more or less finished. I'm just gonna label them by using the type tool over here on the toolbar. Now I'm gonna make a text box. I'm gonna type in the name of my section. Over here on properties, I can change the font style. So here's a quick look at what my sections look like now compared to what they look like at the beginning. And of course, these drawings have their own strengths. I like the drawings that I did in Illustrator. I like how they are vibrant and colorful, and they show scale.